And this is how an engineer would approach it. There's a lot of terminology borrowing in business, right? Talking about people as resources, which for a while was very complimentary and now feels a little insulting. And it is a reality, right? People are a resource that your business has, and the way you're going to take the best advantage of having those people is to set them up for success, to help them feel fulfilled and like they're doing their best work. But it's not just the people, right? It's a broader look at what are all of the resources you have available and what are your constraints.
Welcome to B2P, B2B Business and Podcasting, the ultimate podcast for B2B business owners who want to grow their brand, expand their reach, and generate more leads. Join myself, CEO of Momish Mavericks, Maynard Breslow, as I interview top industry leaders, share best business practices, and explore innovative techniques to integrate into your overall B2B marketing strategy. Hey everybody, and welcome back to the B2P Business and Podcasting Show. Grateful to be here, grateful for all of you. Today we are talking with Belle Walker. Belle is the founder and CEO of Belleview Consulting. Thanks for joining us today, Belle.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, grateful to have you on. I'm excited. We're going to be talking about a lot of cool stuff. You know, we always love talking to consultants because kind of everybody's kind of got their own process and how things go and how they can make business more efficient. And that's kind of the thing here, right? One of the topics we're talking about is the power of process and getting into that and how we can help people have better businesses, but also how to leverage the engineering problem solving to help organizational problems and in a design context in this way. You have a unique story, unique background, and I think that this definitely aids you in the way that you run business and help other businesses. So we get to hear about how you get to leverage that kind of different mindset to help other people. And we're also talking about the efficiency resilience trap, which is, I think, a lot of people will relate to and see how we can help them as well. So a lot of cool stuff to cover here today. Before we get into it, give us a little bit about you, your background, and Bellevue Consulting.
Yeah, I'm super excited to dive into all those topics. As you said, I'm Belle Walker. I founded Bellevue Consulting because I didn't see anyone looking at organizations the way I wanted to. So my undergraduate studies were in mechanical engineering, but I think of myself as a bit of an accidental engineer. I come from a long line of engineers and was out of college before it really occurred to me that I could have studied something else. So I actually spent a lot of time at the theater and took a lot of extra humanities classes, studied abroad, all that good stuff. And so it put me in a little bit of a unique position with having this very kind of humanities and people-focused bent and this formal training in engineering. So I never ended up actually working as a mechanical engineer. I went straight into project and program management and building operations and teams that were dealing with really tricky situations like moving vehicles or airplanes that can be in a bit of a trap because the safest airplane never flies. And if you want to take pictures, for example, from an airplane, it does actually have to get up into the air. So you're always making trade-off decisions, and how you approach those trade-offs, how you bolster that safety while maintaining some degree of efficiency requires a much bigger picture look across the organization, across your policies, your processes. And I realized that there were a lot of similarities with how I was approaching problems as an engineer. So all of that experience brought me back to grad school doing systems engineering, looking specifically at organizations as systems. Worked pretty well, started the consulting company, got cold feet, which was good because I did need to spend a little more time actually putting all of this into practice. So did that for about a decade. And then right before the pandemic in 2019, I decided to get serious about consulting, and I've been doing that ever since.
Wow. Well, perfect timing, I guess, right? But definitely I want to get into, how that kind of brain and training, the problem solving goes into that organizational design context. But you mentioned something first and foremost. I love the way that put it about the safest plane never gets off the ground, right? Because it's just like it's never going to be as good as it can be. It's always going to be as good as it is now, and we can continue. It's got to be safe enough to get up there, and that hopefully no one goes down before it's supposed to, right? And but I'm fascinated by your story because I think I just love how people get into entrepreneurship and their journey in that regard. And for me, it was kind of like the opposite, right? Where it was, my parents, uh, my dad's an entrepreneur, and he was kind of pushing me towards like more technical stuff, be a doctor, go do. And
Right.
for you, they're just like, this is where we are. We're engineers, and they kind of like push you. It sounds like maybe didn't push you, but it seems like, as you mentioned, that you went through college by the time you even realized that there was even an option to do anything else, right? So it's just like this was just like, yeah, of course, right? This is what
Yeah,
I'm doing.
exactly. It was just how it worked.
Yeah, and to me that's so fascinating because I feel like it's not the easiest thing. It'd be one thing if your major was underwater basket weaving or something like that, and it's just something where you can skate through. It doesn't seem like it's really something you can skate through in the first place. Were you really just like wired like that for you to be able to just go through it, or were you kind of always just had entrepreneurial mindset and you just kind of like twisted it and reformed it into the way that you felt like that's what you had to do?
I would say a little bit, almost none of the above, where
Nice, great.
I, for me, the saving grace of engineering is that, at least in the program I did, engineering was a bit of a team sport. So we were encouraged to work together on our problem sets, to learn together. And so having that kind of social element gave me the motivation I needed to dig in and really do the learning. But it took a fair amount of hard work and some contortions to get my brain thinking through the way that the engineers needed to be thinking. And so um, again, I think that ended up being an advantage for me because it didn't come fully naturally. I have a much deeper awareness of all of the steps and all of the pieces because I had to really learn and examine it as I went through.
What was that kind of motivation to then become a business owner and kind of switch completely and get into consulting?
Yeah, that really came from, I mean, I'm sort of the classic uh entrepreneur trap person where I'm using the word trap a lot, but I feel like this is kind of what life and business is. It's full of little pitfalls and traps and places
Yeah.
you need to be aware of. So I very much was the person who wanted to do something specific and didn't see a way to do it other than doing it for myself. And so it's definitely also been a journey for me to evolve from practitioner to business owner.
Mm.
But the initial motivation was I didn't see anybody really looking at organizations from this very technical structural perspective. And so there's this concept in management of scientific management. Are you familiar with that one?
No. Explain a little
Okay,
more.
that's all right. It's nonsense. So it's this idea that people are interchangeable cogs in a machine. And obviously that's not
Kind of
true.
like how the baseball teams are running baseball teams. The baseball GMs and stuff. They're trying to run it like that. After we call it a money ball, right? They're just like, yeah, you can just put them in, and there's gonna like you just got to put in numbers. This guy hits this much, and this guy steals this many bases, and you just like keep putting them in like that, and it's gonna be great.
So the Moneyball is a little more personalized than scientific management.
Hmm.
Scientific management came about back in the early assembly line days, and so they were literally like not even worrying about the bases and the stealing. Like it was purely, you are a human, you
Yeah.
can do this. Like that was the full
Oh,
criteria.
that's great.
No,
Yeah, yeah.
and it did help evolve how we think about organizations, how we think about efficiency. Like it served a purpose, and that purpose is many, many decades in the past. And so this notion of scientific management no longer serves us. We've come to realize that people are far more complex than just simply being a human, right?
Mm.
On the other hand, what I've seen in a lot of organizational design work is this pendulum swing really far the other way to what I call the snowflake model, where we come in and we say, oh, Maynard is amazing. Let's build an entire organization around Maynard. And that can feel good, right? It can lift you up for success, but it has this tendency to overlook a lot of other factors. For example, you are amazing because of your specific background and experiences, and no one else has that background and those experiences. So you're now positioning the organization so that if and when you find greener pastures, as we all eventually do in life and change it up and vary it up, now the organization may have no succession path. There may be no one who can carry it on. And you're sending a message as you're growing to other team members that there is no growth path for them because they're never going to have your specific experiences and life journey. And so they probably can't take over your role. So there's all these different layers. Oh, and I have been that snowflake center, right, where teams were built around my unique experience. Feels kind of flattering and kind of good until you realize if you also are compassionate towards your team members and you want them to succeed, now you're kind of stuck. Because if you leave, you can see how the linchpin, how it all falls apart. And so truly no one is winning in that extreme either, just in a very different way from the scientific method approach. And so, what I try to do with my clients and what I really wanted to start, what I wanted to do with my clients when I started this business in the first place was to be able to help find a happy medium where we look at what the business needs from the organization, from the team members, and then recognize also that you can't just slot in, right? That's the perfect baseball analogy is imagining, oh, well, we need somebody who's got this on base percentage and we can just slap in anybody and that will work. It's not that simple. You can start there and then you need to start looking at the other factors, right? What is that person's underlying motivation? What are their broader strengths? What are their broader weaknesses? Will they be a culture fit, a culture add, a culture clash, right? Where are your what is the bigger picture? So it's this more dynamic approach of looking at what the business needs and then tweaking that so that the individuals can thrive. But because you started with the business, you also then can survive when those individuals may shift, grow, change, leave as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. And then, it's like early on, hey, we have, early on type of businesses, organizations in that regard. Hey, we have new factories. Well, we have humans. Great, wonderful. Just put them on there, and you don't allow people to thrive. And like you said, that other part where it's so uh, the snowflake kind of a way of looking at it leads to more problems. So I guess tell me a little bit about then how you're leveraging your engineering kind of problem solving unique perspective into the unique way that you're designing systems for organizations.
Yeah, so somewhat ironically, this is not going to be rocket science, right? It's a fairly
That's the
straightforward
whole point.
approach. I mean, the number one thing I start with is what problems are you trying to solve? And that feels so basic when you say it. And when you are a business owner, right? I need people to help me do this with my own business. When you are trying to build a team, manage a team, it's so easy to get caught in the day to day and to feel the pain without really thinking about or understanding what's the underlying root cause. So addressing the symptoms rather than the disease. So really taking a step back and saying, what problems are we trying to solve? Is it that we are stretched too thin and we feel like we can't grow? Is it that we feel like we're inefficient? Is it that we're not making the best use of the people that we have? Is it that we're not sure if the people we have can serve our business? What is going on that why are you even looking at your organization in the first place? And so once we're really clear on what problems we're trying to solve, then we start getting into what are the resources you have available and what are the constraints. And this is how an engineer would approach it. There's a lot of terminology borrowing in business, right? Talking about people as resources, which for a while was very complimentary and now feels a little insulting. And it is a reality, right? People are a resource that your business has, and the way you're going to take the best advantage of having those people is to set them up for success, to help them feel fulfilled and like they're doing their best work. So but it's not just the people, right? It's a broader look at what are all of the resources you have available and what are your constraints. Um, there are times when organizations have really high cash flow and low maturity. So they have maybe a bunch of leaders who have never led teams before and are growing into their management roles. If you're not super cash constrained and you're looking towards the future, you probably want to make a bunch of small teams so that those new leaders have a chance to grow into their leadership roles with a smaller challenge ahead of them. And then the business they can grow with your business. I've worked with organizations the exact opposite position where they have very tight margins, but they've got really strong maturity in their organization. And so having bigger teams because they need less leadership and they have those experienced leaders and experienced team members. So it's not that there's one design solution. It's really looking at what are the problems you're trying to solve? What are the resources? What are your constraints? By the time you have all that laid out, you've got a much clearer set of options. And so I also like to try and position a couple of options that are very different from each other. Very few of my clients pick either, option A or option B right off the bat, but that's intentionally because I tend to position them as extremes so they can say, I really like this piece of option A. I like this piece of option B. How do we pull those together into a model that takes advantage of all of them? And everything I just described would work pretty much just as well if you were trying to build a bridge, right? What's the problem you're trying to solve? Where are you
Yeah.
trying to build it? What are the materials you have? What are the constraints you're working under? Okay, now that we've got all that dialed in, what are the various design options we can go with? How do we narrow that into the specific solution?
No, and that's great. Yeah, that it's kind of personally tailored to each kind of situation based on, hey, we'll work with what we got, but we got to find out where we're going to put it and, what are we trying to accomplish over here. And I guess in terms of those problems that you mentioned, do you find that most businesses maybe have a shared kind of problem, or that you're consistently seeing the same kind of problems, or is it something that is the problems are self-reported by the company that are seeking help, like they're already like, we need help with this thing, or is it something that you're coming in and um, kind of being like, hey, you're bringing me in and these are kind of things, or a combination, or something else that I didn't mention there?
Yeah, it's a mix of all of the above. So, the kind of work that I do, I often talk about working on the invisible infrastructure of an organization because when your organization is designed well, when your job roles are clear, when the collaboration touch points are working well, you don't think about them, right? You think about your actual business, right? What you're trying to build, who you're trying to serve, and actually delivering. Where it tends to come into the forefront is when something is not working and not going well. And so often I get folks coming to me because of my tagline, which is taking organizations from friction to function. And they'll say, we have a lot of friction. And I ask a little deeper, okay, well, what does that mean? And they go, I don't know. It's just, I know we're not moving fast enough. We're running into all this resistance. And that's actually a great fit for me because if they can articulate more specifically what those problems are, often they can solve them or they can find a specialist who really deals in that particular pain point. So that's one way people find me for self-reporting. Honestly, a lot of the companies I work with are recommended to me by business coaches or strategic planners or folks who help them see, look, this is where you're trying to get to. You've got all the pieces you need. What you're missing is a clear idea of how you're going to take those pieces and get them to that goal that you're building towards. So it's a little bit nebulous, which can be a bit of an adventure, but I love that, right? I love that a lot of my clients are genuinely at a loss. They know that there's pain and they're not even sure necessarily how to describe the pain itself. So it's a really fun challenge for me to help them really dig in and articulate, yeah, this is where we're having trouble. This is where the challenges are. Let's see what we can do to fix it.
Yeah, that's great. That's great, and I love, you mentioned there as well about kind of if they can identify their own problem, then maybe they can solve it. It may not be such a good fit, right? But then you also mentioned that kind of business coaches, strategists, are kind of a main way. How are they finding you, or how are you finding them? Those business coaches, strategists. What's kind of like that
Yeah,
process?
I do a lot of networking. So both networking groups and having conversations, getting out. I try to do a lot of podcasts like this to get my message out so that coaches know I exist. And then I also always ask my clients when they do have coaches who they like, who they really respect, who's worked well with them, because that's the strongest. I do also work with coaches myself. I'm a big believer that none of us can do this alone, and that especially CEOs and C-suite top leaders having external sounding boards that can help you think through things is incredibly valuable. And I'm one person, right? I can only work with so many folks at a time, so it's really important to me to know who who my clients respect and value.
No, that's great. That's great. And, kind of explaining that process, I guess. Talk to me about the power of process and why that's important for us to know, if that's not something that was included already in what you talked about. Talking about the power process.
Yeah, the power of process comes back to that invisible infrastructure piece, right? Process is very, similar to the organizational design and structure, where most people only think about process when they are ready to swear and curse and complain about it, right? A process that is working
Concentration level is
well.
at boiling point, basically, right?
Exactly, right? When a process is working well, you don't really think about the process. You think about the outcomes, the quality, what you're achieving with that process. If you're aware of the process, it's probably because something is wrong and causing you pain. So the power of process is to get your processes working so smoothly that you don't have to think about them constantly anymore. And so I like to encourage people to really take a step back and look at what are start with the things that are going well, right? What is working for your business and what are you doing, especially in a collaborative environment? So, this is a bit of a nuance for me when I'm talking about process. I am talking about processes that involve multiple people. When it's one person, that's more of a, organization, time management, piece of the puzzle, skill building. But once you have multiple people, there's information that's in my head that has to get to your head, or there's physical things in my domain that have to get to your domain. Once you have those handoffs, that's where things tend to get tricky. And so thinking through what are you doing as a business that involves multiple people or multiple stages that's working really well, and why is it working well? Then go take a look at those processes that are making you want to tear your hair out, the things that you feel are inefficient, or the things that keep having quality issues or gaps or things get dropped on the floor, figuratively or literally. Uh, Once you can have both of those examples, you can start looking at what the differences are, and trying to shore up your weaker processes. Or you can bring in someone like me who's a third party who can take a look and help you see, hey, I'm noticing that in this process that's working really well, you're using these communication tools. You have these expectations and these norms, whereas in this process, someone's just dumping information in a folder. They're not telling anyone it's there, and that's causing a huge bottleneck, right? That kind of example, it's hard to give a more nuanced example off the cuff, but I'm willing to bet a lot of your listeners have had that moment where they realize, oh, there's this pretty simple step that's actually causing us a lot of pain. And it can be easier to spot those when someone's coming in with that outside perspective than trying to walk through everything yourself.
Yeah, well, no, and that I think when it leads to that, it's frustrating that we have to get frustrated before we start looking at that, and looking at those kind of inefficiencies as you mentioned, right? But that kind of leads to the next thing where it's what exactly is the efficiency resilience trap. Talking about now we're finally frustrated. Now we're kind of ready to look at those inefficiencies and work on our process. And how do we fall into the efficiency resilience trap? What is it, and how do we fall into that?
Yeah, I mean, so efficiency and resilience are two of the most common buzzwords that
Yeah,
I am seeing, this year, last year, and they both have great value,
don't forget
right?
about AI. That's the
Oh
AI
yeah, well,
efficiency resiliency trap. That's the way to make it better.
yes. Setting AI aside for a moment because it can certainly play into this, but is not at the heart. When we're trying to be more efficient, right, oftentimes people take a very narrow view of how they're defining efficiency. So they're looking at, how many resources, how much time are we spending on this piece of the puzzle, and how do we really streamline that and narrow it down? Perfectly reasonable goal. And resilience is the ability to adapt, to flex, to change, to carry forward when things don't go as planned. And the more streamlined a process is, the tighter, the more efficient, chances are good, the more dependent it is on everything going right. And so
Or
what
on a
that
specific
means
system that may not be adjustable on the fly or something like that, correct?
exactly, yeah. You're dependent on a specific system. You could be dependent on, certain tools or certain people. So, for example, I have a client right now where they are very successful and they have this rock star employee who does their proposals for their new business. And she writes up the proposals and sends them out, and she does check, with the people who need to deliver on the proposal, that they're scoping everything correctly. So there's a little bit of other input, but that final proposal, no one else looks at it before it goes out,
Mm-hmm.
and that works great, right? That is a very efficient process for that business. It is also not a very resilient process.
If
if
she's gone
she
or if there's a mistake, forget about it.
Right, exactly. If there's, and because she's been doing this for so long, she's very experienced, there are very few mistakes, but if you try to scale that process as is, you're going to either lose some of the efficiency because you're going to need some extra eyes in the training and in building people up, or you're going to find that you're making all of these mistakes that are now costing the business in a different light. And so I think that the trap is that resilience is very tightly intertwined with efficiency. Resilience can be a way of looking at efficiency for your entire organization when we tend to talk about efficiency for just one small piece or process. You can't let those errors or those backstops fall away entirely, um, or you're going to end up with a total lack of resilience.
Yeah, I mean that's amazing. Thing about it, I think it's almost like a efficiency resilience scale, right? Where it's like, where on here can we optimize the give and take kind of thing? Where we understand that we're gonna have to give up some efficiency to be able to be more resilient and moving on the fly and everything, and sometimes how much of that is also like temporary. Like for instance, you mentioned, hey, it's not scalable, so we want to make sure to have more people here and helping the person who does proposal to help implement her system that she's been using, even though she's just really good. And you can't just, like we said earlier, you can't just like plug someone in there. But if we can find someone who's like also good in this way and maybe in a similar way or maybe in her own way, but is there a system here? And at the beginning, there's a training time, right? But then we can get it back up to speed a little bit. Is that or is it something where we want to, for the better of the company long term, implement something that's kind of like has that more give and take and able to move forward long term.
For me, that comes right back to why I talk about the power of process.
Mhm.
Often just asking those questions is 90% of the value. So I would say the answer is yes.
Yeah.
It really depends on your particular business and what you're trying to build and what phase you're in and how you want to approach it and what are the costs to that particular process that you're working on. So if we run with this example, the proposals are a fairly crucial element of the business. Is this is a service business, and so if there's a mistake in a proposal, they can go back to the client and ask for a change order or explain what's going on. But you can't do that very often, or you're going to start losing out on your reputation, which is very important in any sort of service industry. So this is an area where you may want to have more backstops, a little less efficiency, even over the longer term,
Mm.
versus something that's more internal and has a lower consequence, or if you're in a different industry, for example, if people who are doing copywriting, right? There's oftentimes they have a copywriter, they have an editor. You could have five editors all look at the same thing, and the more editors you add, the lower the chances of any, proofreading mistakes or content issues, etc. And there's a limit at a point at which it's not worth it to put that extra time and energy in. And so that would be, you have to really look at the overall value very specifically. For me, this comes back to the airplanes. The most efficient, the safest airplanes never fly. The most efficient airplanes spend basically no time on the ground. How do you find that balance between the two? And that applies to almost every business and almost every sub process. But asking that question, what do we want? How much risk are we willing to accept in this situation? Often gets you 90% of the way to making the decision.
Yeah, yeah, and I love that too. It's not like I think you mentioned. It's almost like redefining what we think of as efficient. Like getting it to that point is the most efficient. It's just not what we think is the most efficient. It's not the most quote streamlined, the fastest. It's the most sustainable, which is also part of efficiency. And I think that this kind of uh, is something that we don't always analyze, especially as we're scaling and we're trying to, kind of implement new systems and stuff. We don't always think about the sustainability of this. How is this going to be? Is this something that we could be able to do that employees going to be able to implement for years to come, or is it something they're going to burn out pretty quickly on, or we're going to have different issues running up in the future as well? So
Yeah.
amazing stuff.
Well, and this
And
is part of what I'm facing with my own business, right? I'm just getting to the point where I'm starting to scale and bring in new people, and
yeah,
the processes that have worked for me as the business owner with the full picture, all the knowledge in my head. I know every client, I know every project that we've worked on. I know all of those pieces. Bringing in other folks means having to transfer that information, transfer that knowledge, right? My initial projects with support are way less efficient because I'm having to put my time in and their time, but I'm also recognizing that this is not the long-term efficiency, right? And the processes that I'm following right now to do that communication, bring in that extra support, is not necessarily the process I'll be following once we're more established with some of those safeguards and routines in place. And so it's, something that I certainly work with clients on and feel very deeply for my own business.
well, that's great that you identify that because I found we got to talk to so many different kind of business owners, but we talked to a lot of consultants too, and one thing that I found with consultancy agencies and sometimes like the old saying, that the shoemaker's kids go shoeless, where it's like we're so busy helping other business to implement the systems that are going to be better for them, we forget to implement them in ourselves and that kind of stuff, and we're like, we need a consultant for us, and that kind of stuff, and everybody needs coaches and consultants. Even the best coaches have coaches. The best
I'd
players
say
have
all the
coaches.
best coaches have coaches.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think that that's kind of the thing. Mentors. Um, Phil Jackson, always had mentors, and he was considered to be like the greatest Zen master, dude who's going to get in there and help the best players who have their own blocks. They're so great, but they're uncoachable, and he's going to get in there and help them because, and so it's, I think that's amazing that you identify that, self-awareness and everything. So I guess in terms of that self-awareness, I always ask everybody, how, in terms of success, right? What does success look like for Bell in terms of personal, professional, spiritual, otherwise? What does success look like for you?
Yeah, it's definitely been an evolving target. Personally, I actually just had my second child in
Ah,
September.
Mazel tov, congrats.
Thank you. So I'm coming back
September
from
what?
September 16th.
But we had ours September 29th. Thank God.
Oh,
Yeah,
congratulations.
also our second, a boy and now a girl. So
Same boy and then
really,
girl.
there. And how old
Yep.
is your boy?
He'll be 3 in a couple weeks.
Same thing with we're about 4 weeks away, something like or 5 weeks away, something like that from our boy turning 3. So it's a good cadence. I got to tell you, have a great cadence on your kids there. So
Yeah, and
congratulations.
thank you. And so, as you, I'm sure, are very aware, those leaves, those major life changes, give you a moment to stop and reflect. And with my son, with my first kid, when I went on maternity leave, I left on maternity leave thinking I'm going to come back and I'm going to build up the business and I'm going to start bringing people in. And while I was out, it's like, man, I miss doing the work. Like right now, I am still in the stage where I am consulting because I just want to be neck deep, steeped in these projects all the time. I really need to like get my fill of getting my hands on these businesses and these approaches. And so that's what I did. I came back and really dove in, kind of double down on the soul member of the business thing. And then this leave, I didn't fully expect to change that much, but I realized as I was out on leave this time that, you know what, I am ready. It's time for me to start building this into a business, not just a job, right? Which I know is such a cliche, but I was loving my job. I built myself the job of my dreams. It's been fantastic for several years. And so now, success is shifting, right? I'm trying to do more thought leadership, more speaking, really getting the word out. And, there's a reason I try to be very free with explaining what is my process, what are the things I'm thinking about, what is the step by step that your listeners can follow, right? Go back to the podcast and say, okay, I need to ask this question. I need to ask this question because I think that there, I can have a much bigger impact by getting those ideas out there. And sometimes you do need someone in with you in the business, in the details. And so having a team behind me that can help follow that through, that's what professional success is going to look like for me in the coming years, I hope, is to really have this sort of business model with the thought leadership out front and then a team that can come in and help anyone who's interested really put it into practice. And then being fully successful will mean doing that while being there for my kids and my family. It's not worth it to me if I lose that personal piece of the success.
That's great. Once again, tying in that self awareness, right? Where on the first child, you have a goal and you realize, okay, they're actually not there, and I have to make adjustments in here. Once again, making that adjustment, right, of what you think is going to be, and then being willing to make that skill. And probably, having 2 kids is a lot different from having one kid, where you don't have the time. And I have friends that are just like, just have the third one already, because then you don't even care anymore. You're just gonna like everybody in, there's everybody's coming, we're out of here. So I love that. I love that kind of. Tell our listeners how they can find out more about Bellevue Consulting, reach out to you, and seek out your services.
Yeah, so Bellevue Consulting, our website is bellevueconsulting.com. It's BELLEVIEW. It's my view of the world, bellevueconsulting.com. Or LinkedIn is a great way to reach out to me, Bell Walker on LinkedIn.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, we'll have those links there for everybody to check out wherever you're listening or watching the podcast. So go ahead and reach out to her. And anything else you want to share with, or anything exciting else coming up that you want to share with us or our listeners?
Honestly, not a ton that would be exciting to anyone else. That whole coming back from maternity leave thing means I'm here, I'm diving into my business, and I'm excited about it.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, it is exciting. New kid is exciting, and implementing uh, the new system at home and how it works with the system at work and scaling all these things. Very cool stuff. Very exciting stuff. So, really appreciate you coming on today, and thank you everybody as well, wherever you are, for making us a part of your day. Really appreciate that, and hope you got a lot out of it. I definitely did. The power of process, that efficiency resilience trap, good stuff. So, Belle, all the best to you, and we'll chat soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.